The world of Hauser Street in Queens was always a battleground of ideas, mostly because Archie Bunker stood in the center of the living room holding a shield made of old newspapers and sheer stubbornness. It was a time when the television set was the oracle of the house and the local news could ignite a domestic world war before the commercial break even finished. On this particular evening, the conflict began with the simple act of Archie returning from a long day of driving his taxicab, complaining that the city was no longer filled vacapite hat theater goers, but rather vacapite hat drifters and weirdos. He collapsed into his favorite armchair, demanding a beer from Edith, who was always fluttering about trying to maintain the peace. The conversation quickly shifted to the state of the nation, as it always did when Michael, Archie's son-in-law, was in the room. Michael, whom Archie affectionately termed Meathead, was reading the newspaper and noted that meat prices had risen yet again by 8%. Michael suggested that perhaps the family should turn vegetarian for Beote health and financial reasons. This suggestion instantly set Archie off, who declared that turning vegetarian was completely against nature because man was placed on Earth specifically to eat meat. When Michael challenged him to provide a source for this grand claim, Archie confidently stated that the Bible proved it. He argued that all the ancient people in the scriptures were constantly eating meat, especially after they discovered that eating apples was a terrible mistake. He further noted that historical sacrifices always involved goats and lambs, asking Michael who had ever heard of anyone sacrificing a head of lettuce to the heavens. As Archie scanned the rest of the newspaper, he noticed a small section had been neatly cut out. He immediately suspected that Michael was hiding the employment section to avoid the embarrassment of looking for work. However, Gloria quickly corrected her father, announcing that she was the one who had taken the clipping because she was applying for a part-time job behind the cosmetic counter at a local department store. Archie was outraged by the idea, believing that a self-respecting man should never send his wife out to work. He boasted that even when he and Edith were completely broke and newly married, he had maintained his pride. Edith, with her characteristic innocence, added that they were indeed very proud and also very hungry. Archie snapped at her to just agree with him without adding the extra details. The domestic debate was interrupted when the television program was delayed for a special editorial broadcast by the station manager, Mr. Lyle Bennett. Archie grumbled about having to listen to the man again, complaining that the station editorials only ever covered 3 topics, which were pollution, dope, or disease. However, as Mr. Bennett began to speak about a terrible virus infecting the country and the dangers of a permissive society, Archie initially thought the man was finally talking sense. His approval vanished instantly when the editorial shifted focus, and Mr. Bennett began advocating for strict gun control, suggesting that the state should buy back every firearm in private hands. Archie was so furious that he marched over to the television set and shut it off entirely, labeling the station manager a fool. Michael defended the editorial, stating that he completely agreed with gun control. This led Archie into a passionate defense of firearm ownership, linking weapons directly to classic American masculinity by citing cultural icons like John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, Gary Cooper, and Sergeant York. He argued that guns were essential for protection, mentioning a neighbor down the street, Irene, who had recently experienced burglars breaking into her home. Michael pointed out that Irene was 88 years old and could hardly be expected to carry a weapon. Archie countered that she could easily carry a small pistol in her elastic stocking. When Michael asserted that gun ownership was not an absolute right under the Constitution, Archie insisted that the Second Amendment guaranteed it. Michael retrieved his history book to read the exact text of the amendment aloud, emphasizing the phrase regarding a well-regulated militia. Archie dismissed the historical text as nothing more than a pinko book, refusing to listen to the statistics Michael presented about handgun homicides. Archie used his own unique logic, arguing that if people were not killed with guns, they would simply be pushed out of windows instead. The argument was briefly paused when Lionel, a young neighbor, dropped by the house to deliver a cookbook to Gloria. Archie immediately tried to draft Lionel into the debate, asking him what his people thought about firearms. Lionel wittily replied that it usually depended entirely on who was holding the weapon. Gloria joined the argument, asking her father how he could possibly oppose gun control in light of the recent political assassinations and the shooting of Governor Wallace. Archie offered a highly unconventional theory, suggesting that if Governor Wallace had been holding a weapon in his own hand during the rally, he could have simply shot the attacker first, thereby avoiding the wheelchair entirely. Michael continued to press the point by bringing up international comparisons, noting that England had strict gun laws and experienced fewer than 10 handgun murders a year compared to the thousands reported in the United States. Archie dismissed these statistics completely. He claimed that England nearly lost the Second World War because they lacked weapons, offering his blunt opinion that the entire nation lacked true masculinity. Michael declared that the country needed more voices like the station manager to speak out against violence. Archie argued that such views were simply paving the road to communism and that the television network needed to hear from ordinary working men. To challenge his father-in-law bluff, Michael picked up the telephone and called the television station, asking to speak with the manager to request a rebuttal. Archie was initially hesitant and tried to back out, but after Michael accused him of having cold feet, Archie's pride took over. He grabbed the receiver, demanded equal time from the station, and suddenly found himself scheduled to appear on television. The scene shifted to the television studio, where Mr. Lyle Bennett was dealing with a barrage of complaints from various community groups. He was on the phone attempting to pacify a local representative named Mr. Martinez, defending the station against accusations of bias regarding festival coverage. After concluding that call, his secretary informed him that a group representing gay rights was calling again, and Bennett directed the call to a colleague who supposedly understood them. The secretary then announced that the gun nut was waiting outside. Bennett corrected her language, reminding her that every viewer was part of the audience, before telling her to send the gun nut in. Archie entered the executive office, immediately commenting on the modern decor and noting that the desk looked like an expensive antique, though Bennett clarified it was brand new. The station manager politely asked Archie which specific organization or public group he was representing for the rebuttal. Archie proudly stated that he was representing nobody but himself, along with the regular guys he worked with and the patrons down at Kelsey Bar. Before they could proceed, Bennett had to take another phone call, this time from a Rabbi Goldman who was upset about a previous broadcast. Bennett tried to explain that they had featured a Rabbi Levine the previous week to represent the Jewish perspective, but Goldman apparently informed him that Reform rabbis did not count. Bennett offered a pleasant holiday greeting and hung up. Turning back to Archie, the manager listened as Archie explained his philosophy that weapons were an essential part of American heritage, just like apple pie. Archie argued that the editorial was wrong because weapons do not kill people, but rather people kill people. When Bennett asked how Archie proposed to stop people from killing one another, Archie confidently answered that the solution was simple: just bring back the death penalty. Back at the Bunker household, the family was celebrating two major events. Gloria returned home thrilled because she had successfully landed the part-time job at the department store, admitting she had been so nervous during the interview that she had to cross her legs to keep her knees from knocking together. Edith recalled a similar experience from her youth when she interviewed with a plumbing company and wrapped her feet around the chair legs, only to forget about it when she stood up, falling across the boss desk and breaking his radio. Archie then arrived home in an exceptionally grand mood, announcing that he had successfully completed his television recording. He explained that he had spoken directly to the camera in his own words, describing the massive studio lights and the cameras on wheels. He mocked the station manager for admitting he had never fired a weapon in his life, calling him a regular killjoy who wanted to ruin the fun for everyone else. Archie then noted that automobiles killed far more people than firearms each year, a point he claimed to have made during his broadcast. When Michael argued that drivers do not intend to cause accidents, Archie remarked that Michael had clearly never driven a taxi in New York City. The family gathered around the television set just as the broadcast began. The announcer introduced Mr. Archie Bunker, speaking in reply to the recent editorial. On the screen, Archie appeared sitting on a tall stool, which Edith noted made him look much taller. In his speech, Archie identified himself as a veteran of the Big War and launched into a theory that gun control was the very first tactic the communists used when taking over Russia. He warned of a massive conspiracy involving international bankers who wanted to manipulate the American public like puppets before turning the nation over to foreign powers. Archie then addressed the issue of airport security and skyjackings, offering a unique solution that he claimed could end the problem overnight. He proposed that airlines should simply arm every single passenger at the beginning of the flight. He argued that a hijacker would never dare to pull out a weapon if he knew everyone else was matching his firepower. Archie suggested that instead of searching passengers on the ground, the airlines should just pass out pistols during boarding and collect them at the destination. Michael was completely stunned by the absurdity of the proposal, but Archie maintained that his speech made perfect sense. Shortly after the broadcast concluded, a young man from the neighborhood named Lewis knocked on the front door. He entered the house full of enthusiasm, praising Archie for his television appearance. Lewis claimed that Archie had expressed the truth beautifully, particularly the sentiment that weapons brought law and order to the city streets. Archie was delighted by the compliments, ignoring Michael reminders about the statistics of fallen police officers, and invited the young man to join the family for a beer. Lewis declined the beverage, stating he had to get to work.